Hello and thank you for joining us on Global Columbus. My name is Abdi Sofe with City of Columbus Community Relations Commission and May Michael B. Coleman, New American Initiative. And I am your host for this edition of Global Columbus, featuring international panel discussion on community engagement, cultural tolerance, and integrations. We have an international delegation from all the way the city of Vilvoorde, Flemish region of Belgium. And we're hosting this event today at the Jerry Hammond Center, Office of the Community Relations Commission. And we have a live audience. Yes, you can applaud. Let me go ahead and introduce you to our distinguished panelists today. With me is the mayor of the city of Vilvoorde, Belgium, who is also a member of Belgium Federal Parliament, Mr. Hans Bonte. Welcome to City of Columbus first, and welcome to Global Columbus program, sir.
Thank you very much.
Also, Abdirizak Farah is with the Homeland Security, Department of Homeland Security. He's a senior policy advisor. Mr. Abdirizak Farah, welcome back to Columbus, sir.
Thank you for having me, sir.
Also, Jessica Soares is a member of the Belgium delegation. She is a policy advisor, a coordinator on youth engagements. Mrs. Soares, welcome to Global Columbus program.
Thank you.
Last but not the least is Catherine Baudet. She is a policy advisor with the Police Commission, the city of Vilvoorde, Flemish region of Belgium. Catherine, welcome to Global Columbus program.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. Before we get started, I'm going to ask Mr. Mayor first. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your work, and your trip.
I am, as you told, a member of parliament. I'm also mayor of one of the most beautiful cities in the world, just next to Brussels, the capital of the European Union and the capital of Belgium. I studied sociology and political sciences. And I started my first job, maybe that's important for the topic. My first job was neighborhood worker. I worked with youth in very hard neighborhoods of the capital of Brussels. But since 1994 I'm a member of the federal parliament, and since 2 years I became mayor.
And this is your first trip to Columbus, Ohio?
It is. This actually is. I have been honored to be guest by the United States government 17 years ago to make a tour through the United States. I visited a lot of very interesting cities. I learned there that there is a huge diversity also in way of life within the United States. That's something we don't see often, or we don't think of in Europe when we talk about the United States. But it's enormous richness when I see that there is so much variety in how people live, how nature is, and so on. But it's actually the first time I came to Columbus, and it's surprisingly in Europe you only know Columbus by universities, by Ohio State University and other schools. But it's a surprising and amazing, beautiful city you have.
Indeed. Mr. Farah, you're Ohioans, of course, but nice to have you back. Tell us about your relationship with this delegation. I know you arranged and had a beautiful round table. Tell us about your work and your trip with this delegation.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Of course, I am an Ohioan, but not only that, I am a Columbusite myself. I call Columbus as my adopted hometown. I am with the Department of Homeland Security, and if I may say, it is the youngest of all the federal government agencies. It has been established right after September 11th by the Homeland Security Act. As part of our work to engage and learn good lessons in terms of engaging with the public, we go around the world sometimes through the support of our State Department and different embassies to learn and exchange good practices in community engagement and integration-related issues. And we've been lucky enough to have a delegation from Columbus area, led by my colleague Karim Shora, go over to Belgium and spend a week in Vilvoorde and working with the mayor and his staff exchanging information on a host of things. And this is the return leg of that delegation, and we have been supporting them, showing them about the diversity of our city and our country, showing them about the programs that we have in engaging with the public, and how we work in terms of protecting the homeland at the same time protecting the American values, the civil liberties and civil rights of all Americans in the country.
Indeed. And I was indeed a member of that delegation, was very fortunate to be part of that trip, very knowledgeable, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. But Jessica, tell me a little bit about your work.
As already mentioned, I work with the city of Vilvoorde. I coordinate policy specifically around the countering of violent extremism, which in reality means that I have a lot of work to do around community engagement, around involving the different communities, youth, different representatives in society. So I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to be here and to learn some of the tremendous projects you have going around here.
Indeed. Catherine, is this your first trip to do an international engagement tour, diversity, best practices tour, or have you done it before? Tell me also a little bit about your work in Vilvoorde.
So this is actually my first international trip regarding exchange and best practices. But I'm a policy advisor with a local police force of Vilvoorde. It's actually Vilvoorde and Machelen. There's a small town that's also part of our area, which we are a police force for. I'm the policy advisor, which means I actually have to work very closely together with Jessica and the mayor and other partners, because we are the law enforcement part actually of a more integrated policy. There's a small part that has to do with law enforcement, and that's where our work actually comes together, and we try to form an integrated policy and integrated approach.
Absolutely. Mr. Mayor, you have had a very busy week. A lot of back-to-back events and community engagements, roundtables, with few more to go. Today is your last day. What have you learned?
I learned a lot, and it was very busy, but I don't feel tired because it's all interesting. And I saw different organizations, starting with schools, starting with Homeland Security and police work. I saw youth work. I saw integration work in a neighborhood who suffers a lot with social problems and so on. So it's very exciting to see that, to see all that the experience, but also the willingness of society to make it better. So that is what I saw nearly every day when I was here. What strikes me most is how many similarities there are in the way people react on social problems, on integration issues. I saw the same reactions by when I talk to young people about the way police officers function, as I hear in my city. I see the same threats when we are not successful in integrating people in the labor market. I see the same reactions. So people are the same at least. But we have to learn from each other, and I really have a list of topics that I can take along to my country, to my city, to experience over there and to try to implement it over there, because on some topics I feel that the city of Columbus is working at a higher speed and is working better together than in some areas in my city and in my country. So especially from the angle of security policy, we have a lot to learn. I think Homeland Security, it hasn't always the positive connotation in Europe and in my country when we hear about Homeland Security, but the fact that they are working on two main topics, securing society on the one side, but building up the society by community engagement, that is less known in Europe, and I think it's the reality. When you want to make a secure society, even at city level. When you want to make a safe society, it's always necessary that these two pillars goes hand in hand, and that you make a good police force and you control very good the rules, and you interfere there where it goes wrong. But on the other side, we have to invest more in knowing each other between communities, knowing each other. When you're new in society, you have to integrate and you have to say welcome to people, to groups, and so that it's the main part I saw here in Ohio and in Columbus, and it's on that area specific that we can learn a lot.
Absolutely. Mr. Farah, your office, as you said earlier, has coordinated this, and you conduct a lot of roundtables and community engagement discussions and conversations and dialogue. And you also brought the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security hosted a huge roundtable 2 days ago. Tell me a little bit more about these conversations. What are you trying to accomplish?
Thank you. The interesting thing is that the Department of Homeland Security, as young as it is, has been working really hard and diligently in building community engagement processes that allows people to be part of the way we secure the homeland, the way we develop policies, and the way we protect the civil rights and civil liberties of all people. So throughout the country, we do have regular engagement processes, especially roundtable discussions that bring together multiple government agencies to sit down with community stakeholders and partners, addressing the challenges that communities have, providing avenues of redress for them, because it's extremely important for people to come forward when they have grievances. People make mistakes. And at the same time, inform them of policies. In other words, share reliable information with the public. And when we share that information, seek feedback on government policies. And when you do that, people will give you a feedback, and you will definitely understand the impact these policies are having, and modify and change based on the feedback you've gotten from the communities. Policy cannot be formed in a vacuum. Involvement from the public is extremely important. That's what we do. We do have these kind of engagements not only in Columbus, Ohio area, but we do have them in Washington, D.C. area. We do have them in Boston area. We do have them in Los Angeles, Minneapolis, Houston, Chicago. Almost all large metropolitan areas throughout the country, about 15 of them, have these kind of engagements. And it's not just the Department of Homeland Security, as the mayor said. The Department of Homeland Security, even though we have such a large footprint in the way of interacting with the public, as young as we are, we do interact folks and communities and people in such a way that there are some of our agencies actually meet well over 1.5, 1.6 million people on a daily basis through our aviation security systems and the Transportation Security Administration. When there is a disaster or something bad happens in our country, whether it's a man-made or whether it's a technology-based disasters, or whether it is natural disasters, FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, which is part of the Department of Homeland Security, is the one that responds to people's needs at these kind of times. So we have such an engagement with the public is extremely important. So we had an exchange, and the secretary was part of that engagement, and he came out to listen to some segments of our community, interfaith communities, came together to express their concerns and give ideas on how we can do our job better.
Absolutely. Jessica, I visited you in Vilvoorde, a beautiful city, by the way, and I was told that there are about 121 different ethnic nationalities and groups in the city of 42,000. Tell me more about the demographics.
Well, it is true that Vilvoorde is a very diverse and multicultural city. We try to embrace that as much as possible. Over the last 5 years, we have experienced a demographic growth of 12.5%, which is a similar figure to what Columbus is experiencing at this moment. So that's another similarity, as the mayor has already pointed out. Those newcomers in Vilvoorde both come from the outside of the country, so from different nationalities, as from inside of the country, because we are very close to Brussels, which means that at the same time, the proximity of Brussels, which is the capital of our country, is an enormous driving power towards evolving as a modern society. At the same time, we face some metropolitan problems, so we have to make sure that every nationality finds its place in our city. So that's one of the things I can take away from this journey, that is that the way through DHS, but in cooperation with the local partners, the government reaches out to every different community, really strengthens the ownership of every different community and thereby also every individual in this society, making them feel like they belong. I think that's a very important point to work on.
Catherine, Jessica talks about the proximity of Vilvoorde to the capital city of Brussels. Now, as the mayor said earlier, Brussels is also the European seat. So how a city that's so close to the seat of the European Union, how does that affect the local identity of the city?
Well, it does affect our local identity indeed, because Vilvoorde is also a very accessible city. We have a lot of highways that come by Vilvoorde, so that means that it also influences a bit the crime rates we have. But we do try, of course, our police force is working very hard on tackling that crime. But it does influences Vilvoorde a lot, and also on the matter of our employees, actually, because the police force is a white police force, and we are trying to attract more policemen from a different ethnicity. But the language barrier that there is, because in Brussels there's a lot more French-speaking people, because Belgium has two official languages, Dutch and French, and a lot of people from different ethnic origin that want to be with the police, they go to work in Brussels. They also have a higher salary over there, so that makes that our police force is actually not a representation of the different ethnic communities in the city of Vilvoorde, and there is a challenge that we must try and that's a challenge we face at this moment, and that's also part of the reason why we're here. We're trying to engage the communities, we're trying to find new ways of engaging the communities, and we have to try and face that problem. So there is an influence on both sides, you know, from Brussels.
Mayor Ponte, tell me a little bit about your integration policies.
Yes, it's one of the main topics. It's one of the hardest issues, and I will explain it. And Jessica already mentioned the fact that we are growing very fast and that we are welcoming each year a lot of newcomers from all over the world, also from Brussels, and most of them are families from Moroccan origin, who are French-speaking, Arabic-speaking, and so to get them integrated in our society, it's necessary to ask them to learn Dutch. So that's at least the third language that they have to learn. So it's a hard thing for them. It's also a hard thing for us to get organized that at that rhythm of growth, your number of teachers and your number of classrooms can follow. So that's one of the hardest things. And second thing is, it's essential for integration and to feel good in society and to be part of society, to get a job, to get economic integrated. And on that point, we are a very economic dynamic city and region. We are one of the most prosperous regions of the city and even of Europe. The Vilvoorde city. Okay. But it are nearly all high-leveled jobs. High school jobs with big productivity, and that match not very good with the profile of these newcomers, who are mostly low skilled, don't speak Dutch, or not acquainted with our culture. So we have to invest a lot to take them along, and so there are a lot of things to do. So we are organizing effectively a lot of class rooms for learning Dutch and at all levels. We try to integrate them by leading them to the sports clubs, to the youth clubs. We try to to make contact, and we have good contacts with the religious organizations, with the mosques, with the churches, and so on. But it's a process which goes a little bit too fast, and I think our main problem nowadays is that we are losing here and there some of our new people, and so that gives problems like we are facing to radicalism and violent radicalism. So we saw 25 young people leaving our city to fight for ISIS, and so that's a hard thing to see as a mayor. But we have also and we also try to work on that.
Now, you have been in the public service for a while. Looking back 10 years ago, is the Vilvoorde city making a progress moving forward as far as equal access and equal opportunities to different ethnic communities and so on and so forth?
I think so. And in fact, I'm only 2 years in the seat of the mayor now, and when I look back the last 10 years, I think there is a process which leads to more openness. We are trying to do more than we did in the past. Like Catherine mentioned, we actually try to engage and hire policemen from other communities than the Flemish communities. So, but it's a hard thing. It's a process you have to make over the years. But our biggest issue is that the dynamic, the socio-economic and the sociological dynamic of Brussels and the environment of Brussels, so also in my city, is that big. It grows so fast, it changes so fast. Also from the economic view, 20 years ago, Vilvoorde was an industrial city. It was a real industrial city with also low-skilled employment, but we changed in 20 years to the more high-skilled jobs, and so the process of changing is a little bit going too fast in comparison to the means we have to deal with it.
Indeed. Mr. Farah, so as you said earlier, you travel and conduct a lot of community engagement forums. In fact, you travel overseas with a partnership with the State Department and other U.S. government departments and U.S. allies. What do you see the most? What's the similarities when you compare with locally here, Columbus, youth issues? A lot of youth disparities, unemployment, grievances that the youth has, disparities, ethnic-based or values, religious-based. Talk to me a little bit about that.
The greatest similarity that we notice is, number one, the hopes and aspirations of young people. They all want to get a job, they all want to be very successful. Upward mobility is extremely important to them. Educational attainment is important to young people no matter where they're at, no matter what background they have. American kids and youth are no different than those you will find in Europe. There are always a challenge. Our youth has certain challenges that they confront and have to deal with throughout life. Adolescence and becoming a teenager in and of itself is a very difficult time. Young immigrant kids also go through the challenge of identity. They come into a new country, or their parents come in here, they get born. There are certain born in the country, and there are certain cultures that are strong at home and other cultures that are strong at school, and going between cultures sometimes can become very confusing for young people, but then such confusions almost every young person goes through. The curve that these young people follow is mostly one to success, but every once in a while, as the mayor mentioned, criminality can lure young people. He mentioned that some young people have been radicalized in the past. Let me just reiterate one basic fact. The engagement that we do is mostly driven by civil rights and civil liberties in addressing the grievances that community have. Our office, Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, is led by an officer who reports directly to the Department of Homeland Security Secretary. Her name is Megan Mack. So the core of the work we do is the protection of civil rights and civil liberties, making sure people are aware of their rights, and at the same time there are avenues of redress. When it comes to countering violent extremism or helping communities to become crime resistant, because that's something that they all are interested in, partnerships, strong partnerships based on trust has to be built with communities, no matter what community we're talking about. And all the communities that I have seen throughout the United States of America and elsewhere in Europe have that also interest. How do we build trust with our law enforcement agencies, with our government agencies. How can we ensure our grievances are being heard? So the familiarities, and the mayor has noticed the last 5 days he has been here, that people are really interested here and there how to build relationships, how to develop trust with law enforcement and other government agencies, and how not to securitize the relationship. We do not want government agencies to be at the forefront and in front of communities when there is a problem. But we ought to be there to help communities solve their problems. That's why it's not just the Department of Homeland Security that engages with the public here and our office only, but we try to make sure it is a whole of government approach, that the local agencies are there. Department of Education is being represented, and you were there at the Secretary's event. You have seen a lot of young people, and you have seen a lot of school districts being represented, because that's something that's also important to all of us, that young people at schools have avenues that they can take to achieve their dreams, and that dream, no matter where you're at, is about the same.
Now, the agencies, about 22 agencies that are under Department of Homeland Security, and you mentioned a few of them, the ICE, TSA, Border Control. Those people who have issues, experience grievances and complaints that they have been treated differently at the airports, the redress that you mentioned, what are those? How can they get answers that they need?
I truly appreciate you raising that issue. No matter how good of a policy we write, or no matter how good of an engagement that we have with the public, mistakes will be made, and it's really important for the public to have avenues of redress, something where they can go to seek resolution of their complaints. And our office has been developing in collaboration with other DHS components. Of course, the Department of Homeland Security is young, but it's a big department, the third largest in the federal government, with over 240,000 employees. If you travel in and out of the country, you will encounter the Department of Homeland Security. If you are an immigrant seeking green card or citizenship, you will deal with the Department of Homeland Security's immigration and citizenship and immigration services. So you will interact with the department in a profound kind of way, and it's important people are treated with respect. When that doesn't happen, we would like to hear from the public. Our office accepts complaints no matter what language you speak. Language access is very, very important. Our office, in collaboration with other components, developed a language access policy that the department has to follow, that people have to be accorded translation interpretation services when they call our office or call any other Department of Homeland Security office, whether you are crossing the border or flying in and out of the country, or whether you are having general interaction with department staff. So we provide language access. If you have a complaint, the forms can be downloaded from the Department of Homeland Security's website. It's www.dhs.gov. It's really easy. And if you go to CRCL, Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, the forms are there, and you can file them in Somali, Arabic, English, what other language that you want. And if your language is not there, Dutch included. If Dutch is not there, of course, you can call. There's a number, and we will provide interpretation. Okay. So somebody will make sure that you're understood and your complaint is being processed, and at the same time you receive response in a timely manner.
And that applies to all those 22 agencies?
Only CRMC. That is correct. So if you have a complaint against any one of these agencies, you can file a complaint with us. Of course, all of these agencies at the same time have their own way of receiving complaints from the public and processing them. So each agency has its own, and then you can also reach out to us, and we will do process the complaints and provide you with a response in a timely manner. So that's very important to us. If you are having a travel-related challenge, then we also have another program where you can apply and fill up some forms, upload your information. It's called the TRIP program, Travel Redress and Inquiry Process, and that will hopefully help you elevate the travel challenge that you may have. All the forms are also on our website.
Indeed. Jessica, here in Columbus, we have a lot of different immigrants, about 132 different ethnic nationalities who call Columbus home. We see some of them tend to bond together to leave certain areas of the city. Do you see that in Vilvoorde?
Well, I think one of the positive aspects of Vilvoorde is that it's such a small city. We only have 43,000 inhabitants, which means that we can use the opportunity that everyone knows everyone. So we really try to create unity throughout our society, And I think one thing we would want to avoid by doing so is thinking there's only one community of migrants or of ethnicities. Some people often have the tendency to talk about the Moroccan community, for instance. We try to stress the fact that there is no such thing as one single Moroccan community, but that everyone's an individual. And again, I think there are similarities by what is being done here in Columbus, working on the individual level.
So are you saying the city does not recognize any organization or entity that represents the Moroccan community as Moroccan community?
We have no entity that is a representative body for the Moroccan community. We have, for instance, a mosque which is mostly frequented by Moroccan Muslims, and which is obviously an important partner for us if we want to reach out to the community. But at the same time, we try to keep aware that not every Muslim or not every Moroccan goes to that mosque, so that the community is more diverse than just what meets the eye.
As Moroccans are the citizens of like any other citizen, the city of Vilvoorde makes sense. Catherine, what are the challenges that you see, barriers in the police business on a daily basis, complaints, the usual complaints about the community interactions with the police officers?
Well, it's a bit what I mentioned earlier as well. We are a white police force, so we see actually that's a bit of an attitude of us versus them, because there is no representation from the other ethnic communities we have in our city, and that is, I think, the biggest challenge we have. But
are you actively recruiting them?
Well, that's what I wanted to talk about now, because it's actually a problem we have, but it's difficult to tackle because our local police force is part of the national police. We only have one police force, and recruitment is handled on the federal level, on the national level. So we have very little impact as a local police station on who we can hire. And police schools are organized on the national level. So everything from starting from recruitment in the beginning, like people who want to apply for a job at police, as education, police training, everything is organized on the federal level, which means we only see the policemen at the moment where they graduate from police school and when they get to choose what police force they want to work for. So we don't have the luxury of choosing somebody from the community and saying, well, do you want to come and work for the police because you can come work for us? We don't have that luxury. It's a federal institution. The police academies work on federal level, so it's their responsibility. And ultimately, when they graduate, we can tell them, like, we have 5 positions. We have 5 job vacancies, and then we get the candidates. If we're lucky enough to have 5 candidates, we could say we can hire you. They get a job interview, so we can still say, no, you're not, we cannot hire you because it's not what we are looking for. But ultimately, there's a big selection. You know, there are a lot of filters before they finally end up in Vilvoorde. And as I said earlier, there's also the language. The people from different ethnic communities often speak French, whereas we are in the Dutch-speaking part, and they have a tendency to go to Brussels. Also because the salary in the capital is higher because you work for the capital. So there are different challenges we do face to have a more representative police force.
Indeed. If you're just joining us, this is a Global Columbus program on CTV, sponsored by Community Relations Commission, with discussion on community engagement by international panel discussion on community integrations. Let's take a few questions from the audience. Cassidy, you have a question. Chastity. Microphone.
So you've addressed your efforts to create an inclusive community. I'm just wondering about the public. Do you ever experience resistance from the public? Can you describe that, and how do you overcome that resistance?
Mr. Mayor?
I think it's anywhere in the world a fact then that some people and some groups you don't know gives a little bit fear to others. And that's what we are facing also in my city. Even in not only 20 years ago, 15 years ago, the biggest political party at that time claimed that no one from Brussels with a Moroccan identity was welcome anymore in Vilvoorde. And that was the most popular political party at that time. So it was a nationalistic party. It was, but we overcame that. With the support of minorities. In my board there are some people elected from the Moroccan community, and it's good for the Moroccan community, but it's also good for the Flemish community, the traditional community, because they see that they are reacting and living and thinking like all people do. So that's one thing of the integration process, looking forward to how you can get people from these minorities in functions, also political functions, which are important. So, but as I've told you, one of the big issues is the speed in which Vilvoorde is changing, and the diversity it gives. When it burns anywhere in the world, we see other communities come. So we had Afghanic people coming, we had Kosovo, people coming from Kosovo when there was a crisis. Now we see people coming from Syria. But the main thing is that we always have to look for a process how we can get people so far that they feel well in our society, that they feel accepted. Because radicalization and violence in society is often built on not feeling good in society, not feeling accepted, and given frustration. Taking away the frustration of people of not being part of society is the main thing we have to do, and that's why I appreciate the invitation and the way we had the opportunity here to look how they build communities together. So I think that's the right direction we have to follow.
Indeed. Mr. Farah, do you want to piggyback the same question?
Yeah, the interesting thing is that there is always a challenge to engaging with the public. And when it comes to refugee and immigrant communities, the challenges are, of course, profound. One of the main ones, the chief challenges are, for example, newcomer communities are, number one, busy establishing themselves. So they don't have a whole lot of time coming and getting engaged with government and all that stuff. The second very important challenge that people face is that fear of law enforcement and government in general. Many people came from countries where engaging with government was not the best option for people. They did not want to do that, and there is a embedded experience that they already have. Maybe they came from a refugee camp, or maybe they came from a world ruled by dictatorship, where law enforcement was a tool, an extension of government to oppress people. And when they come here, that becomes a fear that they already have. So we must take exceptional care to ensure people understand that government agencies are there to serve and protect and provide the assistance that's needed for the public, that we ought to embrace our communities. And over time, people will get there and understand and develop. And one another really important challenge, especially for immigrant and refugee communities, is that these communities are young, they're just coming into the country, and they do not have strong representation when it comes to civic societies, not strong organizations to represent them. So they have to just start small organizations, civil liberty organizations, civil rights service organizations that are young, limited resources, help their communities come to the forefront so their issues are being heard. And lack of those kind of organizations can also impede upon our ability to engage with the communities. So these are some of the chief challenges that government agencies have to tackle before they have a robust engagement with the public.
Indeed. We have another question from the audience. Mahdi or Sama, you have a question?
My first question is to the mayor. Mr. Mayor, how we ensure that local leaders respond to the needs of the youth? And if you may add another question for Mr. Farah. It's about the airport security, and you are from the Civil Rights Department. It's one thing to go through a loan screening at the airport. That's given because they have to do this to protect the homeland. Everybody understands that. It's another thing to be disrespected by an officer or the person who's doing the screening. And I think that's most of the complaints that the people have. It's the customer service part of it, not the screening itself, because the screening have to take place. Everybody understands if they are doing it to protect the homeland. So what is your department is doing about the customer service part? And quickly, in 2012, when I was coming from Somalia, going through the Atlanta airport, I passed through the immigration very easily. They didn't ask me anything. I just went through. But when it came to the customs, I don't think some of the questions that officer asked me were appropriate. So I think that's where the complaints of the community is coming from most of the times. It's not as much about the screening and the security itself. It's about the customer service part. So what's your department is doing about that? And thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mahdi. And we apologize for the lighting of the audience. It might not be clear. Mr. Mayor, you want to take your first question?
Yeah, I try to, because I think it's one of the most important topics, because you see anywhere in big cities, and especially in cities which are growing fast and changing fast, the place of the youth is always seen as a little bit problematic by and that's what we are facing also in my city, which is a small city next to a very big city. And you have two ways to deal with it. First of all, you have to combat all kinds of explicit and implicit discrimination processes against youth. I often say that maybe the main problem is maybe that we are too wealthy and too rich in Europe and in that part of Europe, and that we don't give place and space anymore to our young people, especially in the cities. Older people seems to forget that also they were young, and you risk to have a very repressive way of tackling problems that are caused by youth, that were caused by youth also 20 and 30 and 50 years ago. So we have to combat that. We have to combat the idea that youth are a problem. On the other hand, we have to support them, we have to stimulate them to be active in all kinds of social networks and sports clubs. I think we don't can enough emphasize the importance of being a member of a sports club. Not only for being a good sporter and being healthy, but also to be a social, in a social network, and so try to take responsibility. But that's what we have to do. We had to learn to take responsibility in a world which is changing very fast. And these two things must be the guidelines from our policy, and that means that we are investing a lot in these sport clubs, that we are investing a lot in trying to also make people who don't know the Dutch language, to stimulate them to follow Dutch courses after school and so on. So that's one of the main things that we try to evolve. But in the discussion we have with extreme violence and radicalism, there's also a problem in the way police forces sometimes look at youth. And maybe it's a hard question. How you interact when young people are doing bad things. It's a hard question. But the way you do can be decisive in will that boy, will that girl be on a path of radicalization. So that's the reason why we have decided not only to get in with police force, but also with social workers. We also try to make a combination between these two. And I hope it will result in less problems.
Absolutely. Your second question, Mr.
Yeah, the second question about aviation security and people traveling in and out of the country and the way they are being treated, that's something that we really take very seriously. Since September 11th, 2001, aviation security has become very important to all of us. We all know that our aviation systems are being targeted by terrorist organizations. Our department is tasked to making sure that our homeland is secure, including aviation systems and the way people travel. we realize that as important as that is, the protection of the civil rights and civil liberties and privacy of all people traveling through our in and out of our country is also very important, just as important. While we do have policies that guarantee these rights, and our office is actually being tasked from the beginning, the Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties was part of the Homeland Security Act, and our main task is to ensure civil rights and civil liberty protections are part of the Homeland Security policy-making process. So we work very closely with every single component and with the headquarters and the Office of the Secretary to ensure that these rights are being protected and guaranteed in our national and Homeland Security processes. Now, mistakes can be made, wrong kind of questions can be asked, and there are multiple avenues of redress that are available to the public, but sometimes many people do not even know these exist. And it is incumbent upon us to make sure that people are aware of these avenues of redress. Our office provides one. Every airport has a custom, TSA, for example, has an individual designated for collecting these kind of complaints. And every traveler who's going through TSA, Transportation Security Administration, the checkpoints, or coming into the country or leaving and has to deal with the Customs and Border Protection, can ask for a supervisor when they feel like inappropriate questions are being asked. But our office is available at all times to take complaints and process them, and as a matter of fact, provide you response as soon as possible. What our office does is also, interestingly enough, provide a policy recommendation and a policy fix to the problems that we notice that are coming from the communities. Another important, that's so important in the Homeland Security enterprise is also training for our law enforcement. We do have large law enforcement agencies. Customs and Border Protection alone has about 40,000 officers who are law enforcement. And they ought to be trained on the cultures, religions, and backgrounds of the people that they are serving, because their main job is make sure that bad people don't make in and out of the country, bad staff do not make into the country or out, and at the same time make sure smooth and seamless movement of trade, commerce, and people. And treating people with dignity is extremely important. So training becomes critical and very important. Our office provides guidelines and at the same time provides sometimes training. We do have individuals who are well versed in various cultures, especially the cultures of people who might be impacted by Department of Homeland Security policies. And we also provide avenues in terms of sharing information through our office and through our engagement process. We do hold town hall meetings in religious centers, whether it's a mosque, a synagogue, a church, or a temple, to meet as large number of people as we possibly can. Participating in this forum now today is part of that outreach to make sure people know that there are avenues available to them. The roundtables are also designed to make sure people come to the special representatives from the communities, religious leaders, organizational leaders, civil liberty organizations to come to the table and inform us of the challenge that people are facing at the airports.
Indeed. Thank you. Jessica, in many countries, including of our own here, the gender equality in terms of getting equal access to leadership, jobs, wealth, opportunities, there is some disparities. Do women take equal access, equal share, equal measures in Vilvoorde?
It is something that is high on our agenda, not only on the local level, but also on the national level of the country. So there are many measurements that try to make sure that there is gender equality. I heard from the local police force from Vilvoorde that while the standard is at 18% of general equality in the national police force, the local police force of Vilvoorde is way over the 18%. In the city, we can give you the same tendency. At the same time, there are some regulations by the federal government who even make what we call positive discrimination to make sure that women even have sometimes more access to certain positions that otherwise might be always going towards men, just to ensure this issue of gender equality.
Absolutely. Let me take one final question from the audience. Joma, You have a question?
Well, we are talking about communities and building collaboration among different ethnic groups. I have a question to the mayor. How do you promote the spirit of collaboration among the different ethnic groups for strong mutual cooperation and unity?
Yes, that's a very good question, because there is no easy receipt for that. It's a work for all of every day, but these things starts at school. Everyone, every young boy, every young girl has to go to school. Even when he is only 2 weeks in Vilvoorde as refugee, we try to get him as quick as possible at school. There it starts, because around these schools we try to make also meetings. We organize meetings with the parents, with the families. We are trying to organize festivities or small activities so that each other knows each other. So, on the other hand, we also have to do it on the structural way. That means that, like my neighbor said, it's very important to bring the religious organizations together, especially when you talk about integration. We do have a lot of different religions in Iceland. We had a Sikh temple, we had a mosque, we had a lot of Christian church, we had a lot of Protestant churches and so on. So, and now we are organizing in the near future something that can be seen as an interference of activities between all these religious institutes, and I think it's an important thing.
Brother Farah, talk to me a little bit about, and we're running out of time very quickly, the CVE, the Countering Violent Extremism. Your office done a great job in terms of educating youth to prevent problems of youth going to places where they can get in trouble.
Well, the mayor has mentioned what he called foreign fighters, young people who are going overseas to get engaged in some nefarious activities or maybe providing material support to terrorist organizations, which is crime in our country. But the main interest that communities have, the main interest that the U.S. government has is how do we prevent this kind of thing is going to happen? How do we prevent even crimes to happen? And the best way to do that is through engagement and empowering local communities. Our country, our nation, we have a national strategy that was rolled out by the White House in 2010 in August, and it's our national strategy to counter violent extremism. And if you look at the title in and of itself, it's very telling. That title says empowering local partners to counter violent extremism. So the strategy, we try to keep it very simple, and it has three major pillars, and the most important three, the first one is engaging with the public and deepening that engagement, using all aspects of government to get closer to communities, provide support, provide avenues of redress, and undermine the key narratives that these terrorist organizations might be using. The second one is provide training, so we know how to treat in a culturally sensitive the communities that we engage. And the third one is counter the ideology, this negative and nefarious ideology that these people are perpetuating. How to do that? Government doesn't have a role in endorsing one ideology over another. So the issue is empowering communities to counter that ideology, because it's the vested interest of our communities to make sure that there is no space for that kind of stuff.
Indeed. Now, we're running out of time. We have a few more minutes to go. We'll start with Catherine. What would you advise for young people? How can people know more about your work and the city of Vilvoorde?
Well, of course, they are always very welcome to start a conversation with us, and we, the police, would also always invite people to have open communication and to be honest with each other. And when we engage with youth or even with other people, we also try to do this on a respectful way and to have mutual respect, and but definitely open communication.
Jessica?
My advice to youngsters would be that they would try to think as critical as possible. There is no thing that is illegal about radicalization, but I hope that every young individual, no matter where in the world, can be able to think critically about the ideologies that are reached out to them and to make their own individual choices.
Brother Farah, any final thoughts, advice, recommendations, resources, information?
Engagement with the public matters. We continue to get engaged. We can never do a good job enough. We have to continue trying. We have to also be trained on how we engage the public, understand their cultures, and be very sensitive to their needs. We will continue to do that. Partnerships and learning lessons from other people is also important. And young people matter because they are the leaders of the future, and we must take that exceptional care to reach out to them and go to their schools, go to their centers, and spend time with them.
Mayor Bonte?
Okay, a lot has been said. I can be brief. I think it's our responsibility to give as much as possible opportunities to young people, but it's also their responsibility to take these opportunities. And the aim we have with youth and with us is getting responsible young men taken over for the future, because like Abby has said, they are the future. We are temporary servants, so they have to take over, but therefore we have to invest in how we get responsible men out of these young boys.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Mayor Hans Bonte, Brother Abdirizak Farah, Jessica Soros, Catherine Baudet, thank you so very much for the opportunity and coming to us and visiting Columbus, Ohio. We appreciate the opportunity. Thank you so very much. We'd like to acknowledge a few other members of the distinguished delegation of the Belgium delegation. I see the police commissioner of the city of Vilvoorde in the room with us, part of the audience today. Council member Brother Hawari Al-Hunuti, Fatuma is also in the room. Also, we have members of the U.S. government, the State Department, Leila Hassan, and the Department of Homeland Security, Kareem Shora, in the room. Part of the audience is distinguished members of Columbus community leaders in the room. Ladies and gentlemen, give a round of applause of our distinguished panelists here. That's the end of our program today. You can get this information on our website, crc.columbus.gov. You can also get ctv.columbus.gov. That's the end of our program. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.